if you can build tension into every single page of your book in all these different ways,
Mm.
that's where it comes from. Because there is no one way to do it, and you need to use all of them throughout your book.
Yeah.
You just use, this. Releasing your inner dragon.
So, Drake, when someone says, I think that this podcast needs some tension, what do you argue we should do?
That's an interesting question. Because that's the one thing that I think me and you try to manufacture sometimes is tension between there. Because we do agree on so much on things. I mean, we're definitely different. Um,
Mm.
in lots of different ways. I mean, not just because I'm American and you're Finnish. Like, there's just a ton of ways that we're different. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. We're always looking like in the pre-podcast, we're always looking for like what can we disagree on, so that we can have a discussion that brings that up. I think the question we should start with is what is tension? Because
Okay.
people talk about tension all the time. They're like, oh, you got to add tension to your scene. You got to add tension to every page. You got to add tension to this. I don't think that I've ever seen a really good definition of tension until me and you sat down and really started talking about how would we teach this.
And that is because, we are actually brilliant and you
Well,
should all subscribe for our brilliance.
at
Absolutely.
least half of us, at least half of us are. The other half is just here with a beard.
Yeah, well, we'll never tell you which half is which.
That's right.
I identify as having a beard.
Uh,
So, what is the definition of tension that we came up with in our remarkable brilliance?
so yeah, because I mean, how many times have both me and you said that to people? I mean, we talked about how I had that one chapter in Genesis that I just was like, man, it does its job. It teaches magic to the reader. And you were like, but it has no tension. You've said this a million times to people. I'm like, oh my God, you're right. Um, so when we were talking about this, we're talking about all the different ways of like, okay, here's a way to add tension to a page, and here's a way to add tension to a page, and here's a way to add tension to a page, and so on and so forth. But what it kind of dawned on both of us probably at the same time, what tension actually is where two opposing things meet.
Yeah.
It's just like an earthquake. You have two tectonic plates that are pushing into each other. Where they meet is where the earthquake can happen. Earthquake can't happen out here because this is all solid. So it's where they meet. And so as we go through this, hopefully the audience will start seeing like it's this force hitting this force, and the tension is that joining spot, that place where they touch. And that's the reason why in creative writing you have to constantly pit everything against everything, because that's where the tension comes from. And it could be anything. And we're going to go through a bunch of different things that you can think about for adding tension to every single page of your manuscript. But that's really where it comes from. It's just the joining spot. It's where these two opposing forces meet and rub together. And the more so, like, going back to your original question, we definitely are two forces, but since we align on most things, we're going in the same direction. There's not that pushing force between us. So there's a lot less tension in our podcast than there probably ever will be in, a lot of podcasts, because we are moving in the same direction most of the time. And when we don't, we're rubbing against each other a little bit. It creates a little bit of tension, but it's different from getting like two people on two opposing sides of an argument. Each
Yes.
one is coming at it from a completely different angle, and that tension where they meet is huge. And so it's the same thing in stories. We don't want a story that is just insane tension from start to finish, because there's no room to breathe. There's no room for the audience to just consume and take a moment to really have the situation they had happen to them impact them. So you want tension on every page, but some of that tension is mostly aligned tension with a little bit of rubbing together, and some of it is just two forces slamming against each other, like in a death scene. I'm going to kill you or you're going to kill me. Like, that's It doesn't get much more opposing than that. There's a lot of tension in that because I'm trying to kill you and you're trying to kill me. And so, but you can't have an entire story of that.
Yeah. So, yeah. So basically, your tension is generated when you have conflict between two components of the story. Yeah? And I guess we're going to plunge into it and discuss the elements that generate tension, or how you can create these forces to create tension on the page. And the first one that I feel we should talk about is if you have completely inside of the character, so internal conflict within the character. And you generate this by having the character experience conflicting emotions.
So,
Okay?
I mean, but even we can even take out the conflict side of it for this.
Mm.
Really what we discussed before this is just if your character's experiencing an emotion, they should also be experiencing a different emotion. And that's, you know, where those two meet is where that is. So, you had some examples.
Yeah. So if you think about, say, the book one setup of Harry Potter, of the Harry Potter book one, you have the conflict, the emotional conflict of Harry being treated poorly, but being excited because he woke up to his birthday, right? Because that's where we're introduced to, is where he's like woken up and he's in his closet under the stairs, and we know he's poorly treated, but he's also thinking it's my birthday, you know, and that is a great contrast of events.
Yeah.
I think that was the beginning of the. I speak under correction, but that birthday scene is a great great example of it, because he wakes up under the stairs. It's his birthday, and you know,
Is it birthday or Christmas?
no. I'm sure it's not Christmas.
Yeah,
I
no,
don't think he's ever spent at Christmas in the
right,
Dursleys' house.
right. It can't be Christmas.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
Um, I'm pretty sure it's like, man, it's been too long since I've read the Harry Potter books, but but anyway, that's where
yeah, let's just
that conflict.
so your character's going for a job interview. And
Yeah.
so they're excited. Like this job is going to be great. It's going to change my life. It's going to be
Mm.
a new all this. But what if I don't get it?
Yes.
Like, and it's that thing. I mean, if you just write the scene where, you know, Bob is going off for his job interview and he's so excited and he loves this industry and he just graduated college in this field and he's all excited and he's happy and he's been recommended for this position and all this. Okay, great. Good for Bob.
Hmm.
But there's no tension in that scene. You
No.
know, the tension is going to come from something else. Either um, you know,
What if he doesn't get it? He really needs it, because if he doesn't get it, he's got nothing else lined up.
right. And school loans are going to come due.
Yeah.
And then so that's just the internal. And so this is what we talked about where
Also, actually, a really good example, now that I think about it, is Katniss's opening in Hunger Games, because she opens up and there's the immediate sense of love that she has for her family, right? Because she's got her sister and her mother in the same room. You get the concept of they're a close family, but you also get the impending dread of it being tribute day.
yeah.
Like, it's right there in your face, these two conflicting emotions of
And that's more external. And
it
we're
is external, but it is also in the like Katniss
oh,
feels the dread and she feels the love,
certainly.
and those two like, to be fair, there's a lot of tension in that book, like
Yeah.
all kinds.
Yeah. And that's what makes it good. I mean, that's
Yeah.
tension is the dirty little secret of successful books.
Yes.
If you can build tension into every single page of your book in all these different ways,
Mm.
that's where it comes from. Because there is no one way to do it, and you need to use all of them throughout your book.
Yeah.
You just use, you know, this. But so as an example, to expand it to the external,
Mm.
The Katniss one is great, but if we just take the Bob interview, if the internal is, if we just wanted to go with that, I'm going for this job interview, but I don't have a lot of confidence in myself. I actually don't have any experience, so why would they pick me? Like, there's no external little part of that. So that
Yeah.
builds some tension. So just like we were talking about, that's the two forces, but maybe they're not just slamming each other, into it. However, we find out that this is the final interview. There's been many interviews, and the last two people that are being interviewed are Bob and Bob's wife. And only one of them are going to get the job. And both
That's a
of
lot of
them really
conflict.
want it.
Yeah.
So now we have this external conflict of
Mm.
what does it do to their marriage, with this competition versus,
Yeah.
just the
And
internal.
it's a no matter who wins, because if either of them get it, it's going to have a huge impact.
Yeah. Or if it's not that, what if it's just my enemy, the person I
Yeah.
detest the most? Like, why did it have to be them? Like,
Yeah.
they've been a thorn in my side my whole life, or just a best friend, or
Mm.
even a stranger. It doesn't matter. But that adds this external conflict that I'm now worried about. I guess a stranger doesn't do too much,
Yeah.
but an enemy, a spouse, a
Mm.
friend, a brother, a sister, like these things now add an external conflict to
Yeah.
the I want the job. What if I don't get the job? And so that's why I just wanted to focus on just the emotional side, because yes, we can add the external side, and we're going to talk about that because that's
Yeah.
another, external conflict is another
Yeah.
form of tension generation. But I really want to stay pure here, and I want people to understand that you can have a scene, not a whole scene, not a whole scene. I'm sorry, I misspoke. You cannot have a whole scene like that. You can have a moment in the scene
Yeah.
where the only tension is coming from two emotions. I'm really excited about this, but I'm also dreading this. I'm
Mm.
really in love with you, but I'm also terrified because, what if you screw me over? Um, or, whatever.
I'm really in love with you, but what if you die? Like, um, yeah. All of those, the emotions. I am, or to give a more positive spin, I'm super depressed, but there is a glimmer of hope
Right.
somewhere. I'm hopeful that I can pull myself out of this.
Yeah.
Some.
Yeah. And not even talking about the external. So again, I'm not,
Yeah.
you absolutely should include the external, the internal, all this other
Yeah.
stuff. But I think one of the things that people just miss is just whatever emotional state your character is in this moment of this scene,
Mm.
worming in the opposite side of that, or not even, the more opposite, obviously, the more tension, something that's not exactly in line with it. Even if it's, I'm totally in love and I'm really hopeful that this one is going to work out. Like, there's not much tension between I'm absolutely head over heels in love versus I'm also hopeful that this one actually makes it.
Mm.
So it's not like,
Unless you're Dexter.
that is a good point, because you're really hoping that it doesn't make it. But um, but yeah, so that's, I just don't think a lot of people think about that. I don't think a lot of people think about the fact that internally, and it's funny because in the writer's room, inevitably when I read, somebody in the room, and it's not because they're affected by this as a reader, and they'll even say that. They'll even say, like, oh, this didn't affect me as a reader. Actually, I liked it. But, and it's because we're focused on the writing and we're in
Mm.
that editing mode. And like, this is happening, but they're feeling this thing that's kind of opposite of it.
Mm.
Like, why are you being so inconsistent? And that's what I'll get. And not from anyone who's been doing it for a while, but newer members
Mm.
that are new to the process, and they're just starting to really get focused in on, oh, let's look at the action, really edit
Mm.
this. And they're like, well, this is a happy situation, but they're feeling a little trepidation.
Mm.
And again, and every time they really they're like, it didn't affect me as a reader though. But
Mm.
now I'm looking at it, there's a difference. And it's like, it didn't affect you as a reader because it's a moment of tension. Like,
Yeah.
it adds to the story. That's why, yes, it is a juxtaposition. Yes, it is an inconsistency, and it is there on purpose to create tension through this moment that has maybe no other tension. You know,
Yeah.
maybe this is the only tension for this 3 paragraphs, 5 paragraphs of this scene. And so that's why I said I wanted to stay pure with the emotion. Does it is it is it as good to worry about not getting the job because then it just means you have to go out and start applying again versus not getting the job because I have a kid in cancer treatment, and if I don't have a job, I can't take my child to, try and get healed.
Obviously, the stakes go up dramatically. So I think that is a really good transition to take us to external conflict. So now there is the obvious external conflict. So that is when you are trying to kill me and I'm trying to survive, or I'm trying to kill you. Like that is purely external. And that can absolutely add tension to the page. It is the way that a lot of writers add tension to the page. But I put it to you that if you also add internal conflict to that moment, if you add emotional stakes to that moment, it increases the tension by a magnitude of factors. So in our example of Bob going to apply, as you say, now he's really excited about this job. It's the 3rd interview. He is ready for it. And then the reader finds out, but he's also worried. And why is he worried? Because his child is in cancer treatment and it's really expensive.
And they have 1 week left of their Cobra insurance
Yeah.
from his last job. And once that runs out, he has no insurance.
He has not. So he needs this job. And then you have the excitement and the fear, and you have the external event coming in. And there at this point doesn't even need to be another person that he's competing with. This is all still internal within the character.
Right.
It just has an additional external event adding pressure to the situation.
Yep. And so that's it. I mean, we just have these opposing sides. I need to get the job to save my child, fighting against I might not get the job. And so the tension is created where those two grind together.
Yeah. And then you have additional ways to up that tension by increasing the stakes of not getting the job, which is where those external events come in, right? If we go back to our Katniss example, Katniss is dreading the coming of this event, this tribute event. She loves her family, right? That's where the conflict is. Then the additional stressors is the tribute could take one of her family members and kill them.
Yeah.
That significantly increases the tension level by increasing the stress and the stakes. And that is where that external conflict adds the most value.
Yeah.
Okay. Is when it is used as a stressor to the internal conflict.
And that's where ratcheting of tension comes in. So Bob comes into the interview. He needs to get this job, or his kid, he doesn't know how he's going to pay for cancer treatment and all this other stuff. And the interviewer's like, Bob, I really like you. You're absolutely qualified for this job. We're so going to hire you. Except, and I know you're applying to be an accountant, but I think my wife is cheating on me. And so here's a camera. I need you to follow her. And if you'll do this for me, I'll give you the job.
Jesus.
And then, of course, that's going to lead to, so you found out she is, you know what? I need you to kill her for me. Like,
wow, this is escalating fast.
you just keep ratcheting that tension up, And now Bob, this accountant, is doing stuff that, but we're like, but it's your child. Like she's a cheating person thing I can't say on YouTube. Just kill her. It's fine. So, saying that's how we ratchet up tension.
Yeah.
But again, each one of those is grading on the last. Each one of those is raising the stakes. And every time you raise the stakes, so I guess I just transitioned to one of our other points was raising the stakes is where we add tension.
Yeah.
And that's an external thing where, you can't really raise the stakes internally.
No.
But
Internally, the character feels their conflict, 100%. But externally, you can ratchet it up by raising the stakes. Okay. Now, Bob is in this interview and he's and he gets a message from the hospital, that his child has taken a turn for the worse. They need to increase this. You can add external stakes the whole time and increase the tension by your conflict. And that's also an interesting way to tie it back to your character's growth arc. So one of the problems with just adding tension and conflict is that if you'd add tension and conflict that is irrelevant, right? That's just there for that page, for that moment, then it just gets a bit blasé. Like it doesn't go anywhere. But if your character's growth arc, their internal conflict is, say, that they are conflicted between doing the right thing, like Bob is trying to get this job, and on the other hand, he has an open offer to go launder money for the Chicago mob, right? So he has a criminal option. He is trying to do the right thing. Yeah. And his growth arc is doing the right thing. Now, Bob, he gets this message that, they now need a more expensive treatment. The stakes increase. The temptation to turn to the crime life increases. And that ties back directly into Bob's core conflict, into his core growth arc, as his two inner accountants align. On the one hand, the straight and narrow, and on the other hand, the guy who ends up in the Ozark Mountains. um, and that was
Now,
a great show. For anybody who hasn't seen it, great show.
you're talking about Ozark.
Yes.
So I love what's his name? The main actor of that. The guy from Arrested Development.
Yes. Yeah.
I love him as an actor. He was so great in Arrested Development. I think he's a way underrated actor.
Mm.
Have not seen Ozark. It's on my list, and I just haven't done it.
It
But
is so worth it.
and that's what I've heard.
Yeah.
But one that also is in that vein that is
Yeah.
just this constant ratcheting up, and it made it
Mm.
successful. Is Breaking Bad.
Yes.
It's this constant ratcheting up,
Yeah.
constant. I mean, they never stop. They
Yeah.
just they just keep turning the heat up. They just keep turning it up and turning it up
And
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 up.
it's on the same conflict. It's the same conflict,
Yeah.
right? What's his name? Whatever White.
Yeah, Walter White.
Walter White has got the same conflict all the way.
His is perverted compared to what they did in Ozark, from my understanding, what they
Yeah.
did in Ozark. Walter White's is perverted because it is a very narcissistic,
No,
selfish.
100%. But I mean, it is the same internal conflict. And that internal conflict gets worse and worse by the ratcheting up of the tension.
Yeah.
Is what I'm saying. And if you can keep your internal conflict connected to the character's growth arc, whether that's Walter White negative or like a positive growth arc, whichever way you go, if you keep it connected, then you make the character's growth arc that much richer.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is the key to the success of Breaking Bad.
Yeah.
Because they did it all the time. I mean, there's this one scene where they've got this storage shed and they've got pallets of cash, pallets stacked to the ceiling. And everyone else, the other character that's with him is like, "You've reached your goal. Great. This is awesome." And Walter's like, "Screw that. No, I want it all. Like, I don't want, like, but you said you wanted, I think it was like, I don't remember what it was, it's been too long, but it was something like
Yeah.
he needed $3 million or 7 million. He had worked out this thing, this altruistic thing. If I do this illegal stuff and make this much money for my family, then when I go to prison or when I die from cancer, it doesn't matter because now my family's taken care of. And so he achieves that goal in like season 2 or season 3, if I remember correctly. And then he's like, "Yeah, I don't care. Don't care." And so you watched his mental slide down, his degrade into this. And so yeah, it can go either way. But that again, but what is that? That is tension point. That is, we've achieved what we wanted, but we're now going to subvert that expectation. And that's leads us into another one of our.
Yep. Another way to increase tension. And that is what we call turn reversal or expectation reversal. I'm expecting this thing, but instead something else happens. Now that could be like I'm expecting to succeed in this plan and my plan fails, and that is kind of like a reversal, right? But it's more than just reversals, because it can be anything. I'm expecting my aunt to arrive tomorrow, but she doesn't.
Yeah.
Why doesn't she? I don't know. Now I have to phone people to figure out.
I found out that the magic sword is in this cave. I go into this cave, magic sword's not there.
Yeah.
So anything, like any of that is going to add to that turn of expectation. And I don't like using the word reversals. And this is me, this is not you, but when I'm teaching, I teach a term called reversals. And a reversal is the reversal of who is winning in the story. And so these are major moments where, and I think you should do it because I usually have 2 or 3 reversals in every scene, but they're smaller reversals. Like me and you're fighting and I'm totally winning, but then all of a sudden you get a lucky blow and now I'm fighting for my life. That's technically a reversal because that's a switching of who's winning in the story. But you definitely want in a novel, 8 to 12 major reversals where everything is flipped on its head. So like in Star Wars: A New Hope is the one I always use for kind of the example of this. When Luke Skywalker comes home with his new magic sword, he's winning, but then his aunt and uncle are dead, and now he's losing.
Yeah.
But then he finds, Han Solo, and he gets a way to escape this trap that he's in. So now he's winning. And so these are all these reversals to the story. So I like to think of this that we're talking about more of a turn of expectations. So we're going to give an expectation to the reader. This is where the magic sword is. Auntie's going to call and tell me something. My kid is doing better at the hospital, and so that's what I'm expecting. And then the tension comes when that expectation doesn't happen the way we thought it was. Doesn't mean we always want to do this. Sometimes you want to set up an expectation and then let them achieve that expectation. Because again, stories are about balance. They're not about everything going one way or the other. If I set up the expectation of my character and they get it every single time, that's a boring story. If I set up an expectation and every time they do not get it, eventually readers are like, dude, you should just kill yourself. Like, this is a terrible life. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. Like, gotta allow for wins for the reader, because the reader is, the character's an extension of the reader. So when the character's losing, the reader's losing. And so we want them to win some. We got to give them something. They just have to earn it, but they still have to get it. And then, so really that's what it is to me. It's more of a turn of expectation that we're setting up the expectation. Again, we're talking about for the reader. Yes, the character is expecting it, but that's really the reader that's expecting it. And then we're just going to turn it on its head.
Yeah. And that's why you should only ever tell the reader the plan rather than showing them the plan if the plan is going to go horrifyingly wrong. Like if you have the whole planning session, you're like, we're going to do this, and you go through the plan, then the plan must not be that. Like it must go wrong.
Yeah, that's a rabbit chase, but that's a weird balancing act for me. Because I hate it when it's like, all right, let's sit down. This is what we're going to do. We're going to do A, we're going to do B, and that's going to lead to C, and then D is going to be the outcome. And then we go do it. And obviously it's not going to happen that way. But then why did I waste all this time, like reading all this stuff? But the flip side of that is, all right, I've got a plan. End of scene. And it's like, but now I get nothing. So like, it's this weird, I don't want to listen to the whole damn plan because I know it's not going to work. But I also don't want to get nothing.
It
So
is it is a it is a balancing act and a half, that one. Like
it's something that I've always struggled with to make sure that I'm given, and again, this is me. This is a personal thing for me, but I want to give enough in my story where I feel like, okay, all right, I know they have a plan because I've kind of seen
Mm,
some of it, but I don't want to waste time listening to somebody rattle off a plan that's not going to work. And I know it's not going to work. Like you have some of these heist movies where they'll literally film the heist going correctly. They'll film it. They'll film the gangsters rolling up to the
mm.
bank and running in and all the guards getting down and then getting all the money and loading it up and then escaping through the tunnels and then on a beach drinking, champagne and then go back to them in the room and be like, that's the plan. Like you filmed the entire thing that was a fantasy. Like, because none of that's going to happen. We know that none of because, like, if you then went and just did that with just different people from the fantasy, it would be a horrible movie. But I'm like, that's too much. I don't
Yeah.
want this. But I do want, but I also don't want, the whole, but I got a plan, end of scene.
Yeah. The problem with I got a plan, end of scene is you can do it that way a couple of times. Like once or twice. If it's really kind of natural.
Right.
But if you do it too much,
Or if it's
you
too big of a
or if it's too big of a plan. Like I read this book once where the main character kept saying, I got a plan. And then it would end, it would cut over whatever. But apparently she didn't, I don't know if she didn't tell the other characters either, whatever, it doesn't matter. Okay. The reader never got to know this plan, but it was like 7 or 8 scene breaks like that. I got a plan, this plan, blah, blah, blah. And the problem is with that is it sets the reader expectation so high that unless you are throwing a net around the moon and yeeting it straight into the sun, right? And that is somehow causing a pinball effect that's going to break open the vault, and out of the vault is going to shoot Arthur's sword himself, which will hit the monster in the eye. Because of the angle that the sunspot is at. Unless it's a plan on that level, you're not going to meet my expectation.
right. I mean, that's what I said. It depends on, and like, that's if, oh my God, Godzilla's attacking, Tokyo. What are you gonna do? I
Yeah.
got a plan.
Yeah.
But if it's like, oh my goodness, we just played in the river and my clothes are ripped. What are you gonna tell mom? Don't worry about it. I got a plan. Like, it really also depends on
Yeah.
the situation. Because like
But
in
that's why I
something like
say,
that,
like,
I'd be fine.
you can get away with it once or twice.
And
Like, you
also
could say, yeah,
if it's
yeah,
smaller deal as
yeah.
opposed to, you know,
This was
Godzilla.
literally the setup for the end fight, the final fight. And I was like, there is no way that you are ever going to meet my expectations after telling me for 8 scenes that you have a plan. Ever.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so you look at Star Wars. Star Wars: A New Hope is a kind of a good, I think,
Mm,
balance of that, where it's like, we know that the Rebel Force has the plans. We actually saw them looking at it and going, oh, there's actually a weakness in this thing.
mm.
And then Luke Skywalker is out on the deck and he's talking to Han Solo and he's like, you're not coming with us? And he's like, no, kid, you are all gonna die. I'm not coming with you. I'm gonna take my money and I'm leaving. Um, like we know we didn't we didn't sit there in that boardroom and have them go, okay, so how are we going to do this? All right, Red Squadron, who's going to be led by this, is going to go and they're going to do this, and then you guys are going to do this, and then this guys are going to do this, and this is going to be the support product. We don't get all of that. We get just enough to know that they found a weakness and they're going to exploit that weakness, and that's really good enough. That's all we really need. We don't need to know how the squadrons are going to be divided and which angles they're coming in on and what their primary objective is, their secondary objectives are, and so on and so forth. That would be insanely silly in a
Yeah,
sci-fi
yeah.
movie. You know,
It,
a
yeah.
war movie maybe, but then again, you're
Even
the
a war
audience for a
movie,
different
like
reason.
when I write battle planning scenes, which I do because I've got a big war going on in Sangwell Chronicles, right? When I write battle planning scenes, I will give the overall objectives. Like the army's going to do this, the special forces are going to do this. That's the goals. And then I will cut to a scene break with, something obviously not this blatant, but something like they spent the next hour discussing the plans, and then I'll transition using something like that. Because the reader doesn't need the detail. They need the goal.
Especially considering the details aren't going to work anyway, because whatever you say in the details has to fail, because otherwise it would be boring. Like you'd
Yes.
be reading it twice.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah.
And again, this has nothing to do with attention so much. So we just took a kind of a rabbit
A
on there.
rabbit hole.
But I don't
But
know where we would ever work this in. Like, where do you work in how much of a plan to give and how much not to give?
well, it does actually contribute to tension. Because if you give too much of the plan and you then execute the plan perfectly, there is literally zero tension because you've just lost it all by telling the reader exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So if you tell the reader exactly what's going to happen, the plan must fail, which also reduces your tension because by now most readers know that. They're like, oh, if you tell me the exact plan, that means the plan's going to fail. Like,
Yeah, exactly.
so
So yeah, I guess it does tie in closer than
yeah.
I was
I
thinking.
would say it's a tension drainer, and you need to be cognizant of draining tension by giving too much information to the reader.
Actually, that's funny. We didn't actually come up with any things that were things that take tension away from. I mean, obviously not doing the stuff we're talking about. If you
Yes.
just have one emotion as opposed to a
Yep.
competing emotion, that's going to not be as tension filled because there's just nothing for the two opposing forces to kind of go against. But it's also why I think the borrowing tension from the future is an anti-tension.
Exactly.
It doesn't do what, and it's the thing that pisses me off the most. You hate flashbacks, I hate flash forwards more than anything else. So yeah, I mean it's that whole, the story opens up and the person walks in or the hero walks in and the bad guy shoots him in the chest. And then it's 12 hours earlier. Like, well, I know the hero gets shot in the chest. I know this. So you're actually taking the tension where I'm like, if I didn't know that, if I didn't know the hero got shot in the chest, then as we're coming up to that moment, I'm going, oh my goodness, is he going to get shot or how is he going to get out? And but that's gone. That's gone. It's like, no, he gets shot. He opens that door. There's the door. I remember the door from the beginning of the movie. It was only, 90 minutes ago. I don't have that bad of a memory. He's going to open this door and get shot. There it is. As opposed to, oh my God,
And
what when he opens that door? I know the other guy's on the other side. Like,
see,
what?
our problem with your problem with flash forward and my problem with flashback is in fact the same problem.
Yep.
It is that you know what's going to happen. What the author or the movie or whatever is giving you is the how it's going to happen. And how it's going to happen is never going to be as tension-filled as what's going to happen, in my opinion. Granted, it's my opinion. There are plenty of people who love flash forwards, good for them, or flashbacks or whatever. But in my opinion, there will never be as much tension in figuring out how a thing that you know is going to happen as there is in going like, what's going to happen.
Yep. And you actually just had hit the problem on the head. The writer likes that they're doing a flashback. The writer likes that they're doing a flash forward. The writer thinks the concept is cool. Nothing else. Like it is straight and solely the writer's hubris that brings that in and nothing more. So it's one of my Drakeisms.
The writer thinks the reader cares about his character enough to sit through a flashback.
Yeah. But it's one of my Drakeisms that I always talk about. It's not the how and the what, it's the why and the effect that the reader is going to be connected to. It's not how do they open the door and what do they do when they go into the room. You have to write that. That has to be there. You always have to write the how and the what. you can't get away, because if we don't know the how and the what, we're lost. But that is not the story. That is just the foundation for the story. It has to be there to build the house upon. You can't build the house without the foundation. But why is the person opening the door? What effect does it have on that person when they go into the room? That's what the reader cares about. That's what the reader is going to get from that. So when you do a flash forward, we get the what's going to happen, and then we go back and we learn how it happened, but we know where it's going. So it's never going to have the level of tension. The same thing with a flashback. It's never going to have the same amount of tension built into it as if you just let me live it in the moment.
Yeah, 100%. And this, I feel, is something that people need to understand about tension. If I know the outcome of the event, it will, unless there is something really dramatic about it, it is going to feel more of a plod than if I don't know the outcome.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. I wish, as much as you wish the flashback in the opening chapter would die, I wish the flash forward would die.
I am with you. Flash forwards need to die.
They do not work. They will never work. They have never worked. Like, if you try
I
a
will
thing a
die
million,
on this hill.
yeah,
No book needs to open with a flash forward.
or a movie or
Yeah.
TV show, every single time is a negative. It is never a positive.
So we have a question. We have a question from one of the people who can view our podcast. If you're interested in viewing our podcast, join the Writers' Room for free, and you can be part of our Zoom experience. And the question is, so a flash forward and back interrupts the experience of consuming the theme? No. A flash forward or flash back interrupts the experience of consuming the story. Because instead of being in the now of the story, I, the reader or the viewer, am jumped either forward and back or back into time. But what I'm invested in, if you as the writer have done your job properly, what I'm invested in is the character in the now, the character who is currently struggling with their internal conflicts, the character who is going through their growth arc, who is acting against the plot, who is the protagonist, as they are now. But now, instead of giving me more of the story I'm invested in, you either jump backward and give me some past detail that I might or might not need, or you jump forward. And you then, it's even worse if you jump forward, actually, in some ways, because then you invest me in the character as they will be then. And then you come back and take me all the way back there. Like, it drives me crazy.
And see, this is the difference between, this is a contention point. You want to talk about adding some tension. This is the tension point between me and you with flashbacks.
Yes.
You just hit the nail on the head. It's the interruption of the story. So in my opening chapter of Genesis Saga, I have a 4 or 5 page flashback, but it happens in the character's now. He is mentally taken over. So he is in the now as somebody is yanking memories out of his mind. And he now is watching these memories from the past.
100%. But you have just put your finger on it, because yes, we see the character's past, but we are in the head of the character in the present experiencing this.
And you're getting his now reaction.
Yes, we're getting his now. So it is still moving the story forward, even though we're getting the past events.
Yes.
It is not the same as a flashback of like taking the character back to 10 years ago or whatever to relive a moment as the character was then.
And that's why I think that even though it's this huge flashback in my opening chapter, not only is no one negatively impacted by it, they get to connect with the character, the current character, feeling emotions about his past. Yeah. And so it connects them deeper to it. So again, it's not necessarily the flashback It's the fact that I never leave the now.
Yes,
I'm still in the now. And you're
exactly.
still in the head of the character of the now. You're not
Yeah.
even, that's why in that thing.
So when I did the same in Sangwheel, right? When I needed to explore the past, I set up a mechanic where the characters experience the past as they are now, and it's part of the plot.
Yes.
Because that allows the reader to experience the character's emotions about their past.
And but you just said something else that expands upon this, because both of us did this, and I just realized this. The mechanic that we created actually affects the future of the story. So
Yes.
yours, I'm not going to give it away, but yours is integral to what's going on. It's a mechanic that's used to it. And then same thing with mine. Mine, that instance affects, not only does it affect the character directly, but the fact that it could happen has ramifications later in the story, even books later in the story. So yeah, it's more than just a flashback. It's
See, the pure flashbacks are literally just there to info dump the character's backstory on you. And there is no conflict there. There is not a hint's worth of tension there. There is nothing there. Because I know where the character is now.
yeah. Like, no, there's a lot of tension because they're fighting for their life. Yeah, but they lived.
I know they live because I've just met them.
I don't have any concern that they're. It's like when Conan gets into a death-defying situation, I'm never biting my nails going, is Conan gonna live? I'm just going, how does Conan live this? Like, I know he does because his name's on the cover. They don't
Yeah.
kill Conan. That's why when Marvel re up, I'm a huge Conan fan, so I have everything Conan. So when Marvel redid repurchased the Conan license, and they only did it for like a year, which pissed me off. But the very first series of comic books they came out with was The Death of Conan. And I'm like, you're so stupid. And they do technically kill him in that.
Yeah, sure.
Uh,
Whatever. We all know comic book characters don't die.
right.
Like none of them
Exactly.
do.
But talk about hyperbole when your title, like, we're coming out with a new Conan series, and the first one is called The Death of Conan. No, no.
It's like saying the death of Superman. Yeah, right, Cupcake.
How many times have we buried that cape wearing?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, and that really is it. Um, it's not the flashback itself. It's how you use the flashback. And it's the same thing with a prologue. I like to make the joke of, how do I know if I've written my prologue correctly or not? And I always say, is it titled prologue? Yeah, then you've written it wrong.
So there we actually do have a conflict, because I do feel that a prologue can massively add to a
It
story.
can. We're 100% agreement on that.
Yeah.
The problem is that it almost never is. It's
Sure, but I think that is simply because people treat a prologue as, sometimes they treat it as like a chapter one set 10 years before or something like that. No, just make that chapter one.
right.
A prologue ideally should set up something about the conflict of the saga overall. Because if you do that, then it contributes to the story. But you also don't want to do what Robert Jordan did, which was set up the conflict of the saga perfectly. But the reader doesn't know that until book 3.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
you want it to be a little bit more immediate than that, a little bit more tied into the events.
I mean, for this rewrite of Genesis Saga, I think I wrote an amazing prologue, and it sat there as the beginning of the book for about a year, and then I cut it, because even though I think it sets up the whole
Yeah.
thing really well, it still doesn't matter to the reader. It's still, I think, modern readers, modern people that are consuming stories, this includes movies or whatever, they want to connect to the character in the now, and they want to stay with that character in the now. So even though my prologue starts off 1500 years ago and it does this pivotal event that impacts everything that you're about to read, it's got jack all to do with connecting you to the characters of the now.
So, the reason why I left my prologue in is because my prologue doesn't just set up the conflict of the series, but it is also the opening move of the villain. And the prologue character dies at the end of the prologue. so, but it is immediately referenced in chapter 1 why that is there. Like what has been the effect of this death.
And that's why I think yours works better than what I had planned. Because mine happened 1500 years ago.
Yeah.
Yes,
it's like the Robert Jordan one. It's too big.
It's too big and it's too removed.
Yeah.
You know, when Thalamon, the dragon, Louis Thalamon, I think was his name. Like, we don't get it. We don't get the reference. We don't get how it ties in. And then we're at this farm boy and we're on a road. And then there's these, the Trollic attacks and we're running. And then, yeah, it isn't until book 3. And I still remember that because I remember when it came in and I was like, man, I feel like I know something about this. I don't remember what, but I feel like I know. And then I had to go digging for it. And that's when I realized, and that's when I read the prologue of book 1 a second time. And it was like, oh, all of this stuff matters. And it makes perfect sense.
So that kind of prologue, I feel, doesn't add anything. Because I feel like that gives the reader information that might be important, but it gives them to it way too soon. The reader doesn't care about anything yet. But if your prologue can set up immediate conflict while also hinting at the larger saga, then I feel like it does a good job in its prologuiness. But I mean, there's room for disagreement. I do also know for a fact that there are readers who absolutely just skip the prologue.
Oh, yeah.
So that is the other thing to be aware of, is don't put anything so critical in your prologue that the reader needs it, because they are quite likely to just page right over it.
Yeah, a lot of people don't even read the prologue. They just turn of it. But I feel the same thing about the Stormlight Chronicles from Sanderson. That prologue, I don't feel like I've needed.
So I mean, I'll be honest, like that prologue nearly made me quit the book, because it reads like a video game instruction manual to how to use the magic.
Yeah.
That's what it reads like. And I'm like, my guy, I love your worlds. I truly have nothing but admiration for your world building, for your magic, for all of those things. But I did not need to play through a video game tutorial to consume your epic fantasy saga.
Right. Now, I mean, on the same note as Wheel of Time, it sets up this massive thing, but not until it doesn't matter to me yet.
Exactly. And that's the thing. That's the thing. You give the reader the information they need when they need it. Yeah. Not 3 books before, especially when you're releasing 1 book a year or 1 book every 2 years. I mean, come on. Ain't no one going to remember that.
Yeah. That's the problem with it. And that's a good, to tie it into this, it's a good way of reducing tension, just sucking the tension out of it.
It's a great way of reducing tension.
Well, you're
giving the reader information they don't need is a great way to suck the tension straight out of a story. And that applies to names as well, by the way. Naming like 50 million like minor characters. All you're doing is giving the reader too many names to remember and sucking the tension straight out of the story.
Yeah. All right, we got a couple more things on our list. So the question I would have would be, what does having a character that brings uncomfortable things to the story, or having a situation that's uncomfortable, how does that add tension? How does that help the story?
So if you put the reader into an uncomfortable position, then it adds tension as the reader's internal like emotions and thoughts and feelings conflict with the position that the story is putting them in. Okay. So an example would be if the character has always acted a certain way, the character has always been a chill, cool, calm person. And then suddenly they react with a white hot rage, like all kinds of emotion coming out. To the reader, this is a shocking thing. And they want to know why. Because they have an expectation from this character. And now they are put in an uncomfortable position of experiencing this character and acting contrary to the nature that they have been trained to expect.
Yeah, there's a type of comedy that my oldest can't even watch. It's called anxiety comedy. Um, Workaholics. I love that show, but it's literally just anxiety comedy. It's these people are in a day job and they do the dumbest stuff that you 100% know is going to get them fired. And so you're just constantly like, what are you doing? The whole time. It's just nothing but anxiety, 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 anxiety. And some people just cannot watch
Mm.
that level of stuff. But it is, I mean, you know, hey, the boss wants us to work a double shift. So you know what we're gonna do? Normally we get stoned at night, and she's taking that from us. So let's actually just bring a little personal tent and we'll just put it in our cubicle and we'll smoke our weed in there, even though we're not allowed to. Like, you're like, okay, so you're gonna get fired. Or there was that wasn't an episode, but there was an episode of oh, they're gonna drug test all of us. So how do we work it out to where we use someone else's urine? How do we get this worked out? Because they want to actually be in the restroom with us while we're doing this. And so they come up with this elaborate scheme that is just completely illegal. Um, and so the whole time, that's the whole thing. It's all anxiety. It's all just
Mm.
you guys are the dumbest characters, and you come up with the dumbest plans to solve your problems. And then how is it going to turn out without you being fired? And that's really what Workaholics is all about. That's the whole show.
Yeah.
So yeah,
We've got another comment that says, or a trigger scene. Yeah, like a scene that triggers something, that puts the reader into an uncomfortable position. Also, a scene where the social contract is broken, whether that is the social contract in the book or the reader's social contract. Either one can put the reader into an uncomfortable position. And that can make the reader think, and that conflict between the reader's like expectation of behavior and the actual behavior they're seeing um, generates tension.
yeah, yeah. I'm in a public toilet. I'm sitting there doing my business. All of a sudden, the door opens up. Someone walks in and then closes it behind them, and just stands there with their back against it. And you're like, don't mind me. This has nothing to do with you. Don't mind me. It's like, it has something to do with me. Like,
Yeah, I'm here. Like this is a problem. Like,
so it's just this. It's a social construct. You don't walk into somebody when they're in a public bathroom when you're a stranger. You don't do
yeah.
that. And so now the audience is like, oh, what's going on here? Like, obviously, this is not normal. Um, and the person that comes in, I'm not saying is doing anything to the person that's now. It's obvious that they're
Mm.
running from something, hiding from something, whatever. They're literally not there to mess with the person that, our main character who's there. But still, that's an incredibly uncomfortable situation. And so that adds a lot of tension to the
The
scene
scene.
that's
Yeah.
going on. So yeah, these are the uncomfortability. Is it? And the only other thing I had on my list, well, there's actually a couple other things, but I don't know if we were going to get to them. Um, and this is something I brought up when we were discussing this that I think a lot of people miss, and it's just the desire.
Mhm.
And this builds down to understanding what the character wants. What is their motivation? What is their desire? What are they trying to achieve? And obviously, this becomes very apparent with oh, I just learned that my child was kidnapped. My desire is to save my child. I'm not talking about that. Literally talking about kind of going back to the Bob thing. Just
Mm.
knowing that Bob really wants the job. Because a lot of people will miss that. They'll go, well, isn't it obvious they're going for an interview? Like they'll just write Bob going for an interview, but they won't write that he really wants this job. They'll just write that he's going for an interview. And they'll
Yeah.
just say, well, it's obvious. No, it's obvious to you.
And it's one of the things that we discussed way back on that Milan chapter of yours, your magic teaching chapter,
Mm,
because your purpose with the chapter was to teach the reader magic,
mm.
which you did.
And I got
But
locked into that.
yeah, you
I
were,
got blinded by it.
yeah. But the tension that was added in the end was just that Milan really wants something and he's not getting it while doing his magic. That's it.
Right. Yeah, it's not an action scene. It's not a nothing goes wrong. Nothing. Matter of fact, in that scene, he gets what he wants.
Yeah.
Like, so he wants to get this one teacher to finally sign off that he can go to this other school, they can advance to this other place. We get that desire right up front. Hey, I want, you're the last holdout. And that's what I really added. At the very beginning, it's like, all my other teachers have signed off. Why hasn't this jerk signed off? Why is he putting me through all these hoops? I do not understand. Now there's a payoff for it, and the payoff was already there. At the
Yeah.
end of it, you learn that the reason why this teacher's holding out is because he actually likes Malant, and the last two students that have gone to this other school have come back dead. And he doesn't want that to happen to Malant. He likes Malant. And so but that creates that tension in the beginning. It's like, I don't understand. This is my favorite teacher. Why is he stonewalling me? Why is he not, letting this? So that's where that's why I say you need alpha readers and beta readers, because even as good of a storyteller as I feel I am, I still just kind of became blind. I was like, I'm going to teach the reader magic, and that's what the scene is for. And I'm going to put a little bit of thing at the end where you find out that the last two students that have gone to this training facility have died, and so that adds a ton of tension to the scene at the end. But going through the scene, there just wasn't that tension. So by just adding in that the teacher, because I didn't have that, I didn't really have that everyone else had signed off, because it wasn't important. It was
Yeah.
just, I never even thought about it. So I just added the element of all the other teachers have already approved his transfer. He had, and this is the last one. And just by adding that one thing now, as you go through it, there's a lot more tension through it. And so even though the chapter is primarily an information chapter, you learn about magic, you learn a lot about the world. You learn, it really is the first time, because it's chapter 4, but it's the first time where I expand how big the world is, and all the different elements, or quite a few of the elements and stuff that are going on in it. That layer of tension just really, really, really enhances the scene, and it makes it so much more enjoyable for the reader.
Yeah.
Not that anyone complained about it before, but
But it's like it does make a difference to people staying engaged with the book, And this is the reason I think we should also talk about why you need to add tension. A reader who has no tension in a chapter reaches the middle of the chapter and maybe they're like, oh, I'm going to go watch, I don't know, Ozark or whatever. And they put the book down and they go watch it. And if there's nothing in the back of their mind saying, I wonder how this conflict turns out, they might not pick the book up again. They might put the book down to go to bed, and when tomorrow night, when they have time again, they watch something or they read something else.
Yeah. And 100% of people who do not finish your book do not buy your next book.
Yes. And do not give you a review, and do not anything. Like, you've just lost that reader.
Yep.
So that is why tension is important.
Yeah.
Now, should you add tension to every single page, like massive conflict? No, you want up and down. Like, I don't think you should add massive conflict to every single page. But every chapter, at least every chapter or every scene, needs tension and conflict to pull the reader through.
But I think with what we're discussing here, you can add tension to every page. You just add different types of tension, different levels of tension. Sometimes the tension is kind of bumping against each other. Sometimes it's head-on collisions. But I think you can. And so, like, to continue to pound on, my mistake with the Malant chapter, that chapter was incredibly interesting. and no one put the chapter down. Everyone read it and everyone was interested by the events that happened through it. But no one was compelled. They never had a will this, won't this. It's just a, oh, that's really interesting information. Oh, that grows the world here. Because by chapter 4, I've earned their loyalty.
Mm.
They're invested in the story. And so it's a new character, and they're like, okay, it's a, here's the third character that I'm learning. So let me learn about this third character. But they're already hooked in the other characters' lives. And so before the added conflict was added, that layer of tension that was threaded through it, it was a very interesting chapter. And I was fine with that because all my beta is like, oh yeah, no, it was a great chapter. I was really interested. I really loved learning about how the magic works. I love that you built the society a bit more because they have discussions and there is tension in their discussions because the teacher doesn't want to answer these questions. They're kind of taboo. You're kind of pushing the social norms. And so I do have those layers of tensions that we talked about.
Mm.
So there was nothing in it that would make a reader want to stop reading it halfway through. You're going to read it to the end. So that's why I got complacent. And it was like, great, I'm fine with that. Until you came along and was like, yeah, it's fine chapter, but here's what it needs. And it was like, why couldn't I see that? Because all the elements were there. There was already there to add those things. So that's really what you want to think about. And I think you can put tension on every single page. I honestly do. Even if it's just, I have an internal emotion and I have another emotion internally that's either against it or slightly off of it or whatever. Even
Yeah.
something as simple as that. I'm going for this job interview. I really, really want this job interview. It's exactly the job I want. But what if I don't get it? Because there's 300 people, there's 300 other people applying for it. I'm probably not as good as some of them.
So one of our peanut gallery is asked, how do you find a sweet spot of not too much or not enough tension? I'm assuming you mean too much or not enough. So, and this is going to sound a little weird, but you can have too much tension. And that is if you do not give the reader the chance to breathe. You can jam too much story in, too much tension into a thing, and leave the reader going, actually, I'm just exhausted. I'm going to put this down and give myself a break outside of the story, because the story's not giving me a break. And then they might not go back to.
And that's where you run into that danger.
Yeah. So how do you find the sweet spot? I think that you get beta readers, to be honest with you, because it is hard as the author to find the sweet spot. And this
Another
is why we need beta readers, critique circle, whatever. You need other people to read your stuff and give you feedback before you publish, because you need people to say, I couldn't breathe through the story. Like I could never consume anything in detail because everything was at this breakneck pace. Okay, there was just too much going on, too much tension. I read it, I enjoyed it, but it kind of plodded, like I read one chapter a night or whatever. That's not ideal either. You want people to read 2 or 3 chapters and be like, I had to put it down because I have to go to work tomorrow, but I was like super key. That's what you want.
Yeah, that's exactly what you want. This is another one of my Drakeisms. Well, there's two. One, I always say, I will never tell you that I'm a good writer, because every person I've ever met that talks about how good of a writer they are is usually a terrible writer. So I always just say, so I'll just tell you that other people think I'm a good writer. But it goes down to one of my Drakeisms. One of my Drakeisms is, you do not get to decide if your story is successful. You don't, because you are blind to it. It is always successful. It could be the worst piece of garbage ever, but you think it's the best thing since sliced bread. You do not get that ability. The only people who get to decide if your story is good or not is strangers.
Yep.
That's it. Other
Yep.
people. People don't care about you. Not your mom, not your spouse, not your
Mm.
friends, you know. And every time I say that, inevitably somebody will go, oh, no, no, no. I've got this person in my life, and they're brutal on me. They may be, but they are as brutal as they know you can take. Whereas a stranger, like when you come to the writer's room with me, I mean, there's a reason why my stuff is called Drake's Brutal Writing Advice. I'm just brutal. I'm not mean, but I
Mm-mm.
don't care. You came to me to see, to have me, or when they come to your group, to
Mm.
have us point out your weaknesses in your story. So I'm gonna do that. And I'm not there to make you, I don't have a personal relationship with you. So, you know, our relationship is you come to us to have us tell you what we feel your weaknesses are so that you can improve upon them. That's what you need. And if you don't get that before you're published, if you don't have beta readers, if you're not a part of a writers group getting this feedback, if you don't, you know, join the writers room, whatever, you will 100% get it from Amazon reviewers.
Yeah.
The problem is that, or the difference is when you come to the writers room and you know, you bring your stuff to us, yeah, it's recorded for posterity and for training inside the writers room, but that's it. Like no one finds out what you did wrong, what you did right, or anything like that. It's just between, you know, you and me and the other people in the writers room trying to learn how to be better writers. When
Exactly.
you have Amazon tell you, when you have an Amazon customer say, this was the worst thing ever, the entire world gets to read that for the rest of eternity.
Yep.
And the whole world knows your shortcomings. And so you may think, and I can't tell you, I've a plethora of stories of people. It's like, yeah, I don't understand. I wrote this breathtakingly awesome book, and then I put it up there, and all I've gotten is 1-star reviews, and everybody's just poop on it. But it's and this is where you always know their maturity level as a creator, because the next thing is in, that's what Hollywood is doing constantly. But I know it's them. They're the idiot. You know, so many times it's like back when self-publishing wasn't where it's at, when it was just coming out, I would have so many people say, well, I'm going to self-publish my manuscript because it's the best book that's ever been written. And yes, I've gotten 400 rejection letters from the industry, but it's only because they're an idiot. You know, those people, they don't understand what they're doing. And I'm always like, okay, all right, that's possible. That is possible that 400 people that have spent their lives doing an industry are dumb, and you who've never been in the industry know what you're talking about. That is possible. But perhaps, and I know this is crazy, but perhaps, maybe, I know, just I know it's fantasy, but I'm a fantasy writer, so let's just go with it. Perhaps maybe the 400 people who are in the industry as professionals and do this for a living might actually, I know it's crazy, but they might actually know something more than the one person who's never been in the industry.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. But
so
yeah, so you absolutely need tension in your book. You need tension in your chapters, and we've given you a couple of ways to do it. So just to close off, it you can add tension with your internal emotional conflict, two conflicting emotions inside the character warring with each other.
and yeah, now let me, because
Yeah.
the way you said is a little, there is internal conflict, but
Mm.
but this is not even talking about, this is like a baby step of that. This is just two emotions that are kind of opposed to each other.
Yeah.
So there's the internal conflict, that is great tension. But what we're talking about is literally just this, I'm excited about this, but I'm also a little scared or
Mm.
whatever.
Yep. Then you have the external stakes, which can also be used as additional stressors that increase the tension from the internal conflicting emotion. So this is where you have, for example, Katniss fearing the tribute, Katniss's sister being chosen on the tribute. That external event immediately ratchets up the tension. Then we have the next one.
Rising stakes.
The
Rising stakes.
Yep, we'll cover it.
Okay. So you've got the external tension, and then you can go to the next level. You just keep
Yeah.
rising, you just keep ratcheting up,
Yeah.
more bigger, badder things happen. We talked about turn of expectations. If you want
So
to.
yeah, so turn of expectations is where I expect this thing to happen, but instead this other thing happens. It doesn't necessarily have to be like a direct negative thing that happens, but it's not what I expected. And then you can put the reader into an uncomfortable position, either by breaking the social contract or by having the character act in a way that is different from how they normally act,
And
and
that can be,
increases
we
the
didn't
tension.
say this, but that can be a secondary character too. You can have a
Yes.
secondary character that does something out of what we've done. It really comes down to the reason why this is all this important, the reason why we put all this tension in here is we want the characters to earn the highs, and to earn the highs, they have to get into the lows. And so that tension is where you're going to get that waffling up and down of the story to keep the reader engaged and in tension, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. So tension gives you the highs and the lows. Tension is what makes your story works, and it what pulls your reader through the story. And I think that that is a good place on which to end this podcast.
Yep.
And we will see you soon for another one.
Bye.
Good day to our esteemed listeners. I'm Marie Mullaney, and it has been a pleasure guiding you through the nuances of writing and world building. If our podcast has enriched your authorial journey in any way, please consider liking and subscribing. Sharing our content with your peers is a powerful way to support our mission and ensure we continue to deliver insightful and valuable episodes. Your engagement is greatly appreciated. For a deeper understanding of the topics we've discussed, head over to Just in Time Worlds on YouTube. It is a treasure trove where fantasy meets history and science. Every Tuesday, you'll find new videos that delve into the intricacies of world building, drawing from our rich real-world history. Whether you're a writer, a role player, or just a fantasy enthusiast, Just-in-Time Worlds offers unique insights that will enrich your perspective. Check it out and join the journey of crafting incredible worlds.
If you are ready to take your writing to the next level and work with a group of highly motivated, dedicated writers who are all working to not only improve their writing, but improve your writing, plus you get to work with me on a weekly basis, then I'll encourage you to check out writersroom.us. This is a website that I have created that I really wish I had 30 years ago. It's everything a writer needs to become a better writer. Not only do we do weekly critique sessions, both from other members as well as me, we have daily writing sessions, I do monthly classes, Q&As, we have activities, I do all sorts of learning exercises, such as I do a quarterly writing prompt contest, and just tons and tons and tons of things. So if you're ready to get serious about your writing and you want to actually finish that novel and have a chance of it being published, then I encourage you to head on over to the Writer's Room and join me there. And as a special promotion for listeners of Releasing Your Inner Dragon, I'll go one step more. If you would like to get 50% off for 3 months, reach out to me. There's a million ways you can do that. You can do it through starvingwriterstudio.com, drakeu.com, any of my social medias such as LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, whatever. Reach out to me, say that you would like to check out the Writer's Room for 50% off, and I will send you a link that will allow you to do just that. So hopefully you're ready to start getting serious about writing, and I'll see you in the Writer's Room.